Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, warshippers of all ages, welcome to YouTube. My name is SeaRaptor, and today we're going to bring you a first look at the very last Italian battleship we have yet to cover. This is Tier 5's Conte di Cavour, currently in super testing, and presumably at some point she'll come to the game. We don't know when. They haven't announced when the Italian battleship line is coming yet. We just know that they're on the way, because now, finally at last, all of these ships have been into super testing, and here we are. So Conte di Cavour, is the last ship that we have had the chance to look at here. You know, they kind of rolled these ships out in a very unusual order. Like, we got the 6, 7, 8, and 10, and then we got the 4, 5, and 9, and then some of those went away, and some of them came back, and so on and so forth. Anyway, bottom line is, these are the 4 and the 5 were the last two ships that we really got access to have a look at, and so I've kind of drug my heels on getting these videos done, and so Conte di Cavour pulls up the rear here as the dead last one on the line we're going to look at, but we are going to look at her. Let's have a check, right? Now, one of the things you're going to hear me do a lot in this video is compare her to her premium cousin in this tier, and that is Tier 5's Giulio Cesare, of course, because Cesare is arguably one of the most OP premiums in the tier. Arguably in the whole game. I feel like that's probably too broad of a statement, but she's certainly one of the best Tier 5 premiums out there. And as we go through these stats, what I realized as I started looking the ship over was that Cesare really should have been a Tier 6 premium, right? Because, I'll make this point now before we get too far into the video. The Conte di Cavour you're seeing here is an earlier refit from Cesare, okay? You'll notice, for example, like the general lines of the ship, if you put her next to Cesare, are the same. But the big difference is this one of the big differences, this middle turret here, of course, on Cesare. Cesare doesn't have this. She only has the 10 barrels, 5 forward, 5 aft. Conte di Cavour has her original armament of 13 barrels. And in the refit that was performed, I believe, in the early 1930s, this turret was removed, some more superstructure was built in here, a lot more AA guns were added, and so on. So Cesare represents what all of these ships came to look like, all of the ships in this class eventually came to look like by, let's say, about 1937. But Conte di Cavour here represents what the ship looked like, let's say, about 10 years before that in the late 1920s. More closer to as she rolled out of the yard. And these ships were built in, what was it? I was just looking at it. Yeah, these are all like almost World War I era ships. All of these ships were built and laid down in 1910, launched in 1911, and completed in either 1914 or 1915. So they went through at least one decent refit period in the 1920s. That's the configuration you're seeing here of Conte di Cavour now. But the Giulio Cesare we have in game represents kind of the final form of the Conte di Cavour class as it was known in the Regia Marina, where this turret was gone and everything else. In my opinion, when you look at the stats of that ship, and we're going to talk about this, especially in the main battery, Giulio Cesare really should have been Tier 6. Well, she'd be a much more balanced premium ship if they had made her Tier 6. Anyways, enough gabbing. Let's get on with this here. Survivability, as we always do, we like to start at the beginning, talk about the important stuff. You see here, 38,700 hit points. Hey, guess what, guys? I'm singing a familiar song by now. If you've watched all these Italian battleship videos, this is worst in tier. And again, it's not that close. It's really not that close. The next ship up the line that I'm seeing here, actually, no, it's okay, right. Technically, it's not worst in tier. Verbus Unitas exists, but let's be honest. Does anybody actually like or play that ship? I mean, no. So yeah, most other battleships start in the 40-ish thousand point range and go on up. You've got some true monsters in this tier, like Congo, with almost 55,000 hit points, just a touch over 54,000 hit points. I mean, you're starting from way behind when you put her next to New York and Piotr Veliki and Iron Duke, right? She's 10,000 points or more behind quite a bit of her competition in this tier. She's certainly the lowest health point total of any of the tech tree battleships at Tier 5. Torpedo protection, 15%, nothing to write home about. This is not exciting. Again, talking about refits, the infamous Italian Pugliese system was not added to the ship until that early 1930s refit period that she would have gone through, represented in-game by Giulio Cesare. Cesare's torpedo protection is 30%. You see here Conte di Cavour before that fancy system only coming in at 15%. And there's ships in this tier that have Texas has got quite a bit of torpedo protection. Cesare has 30%. New York has 28%, right? So there's a lot of ships with better torpedo protection. This is nothing to get excited about. Armor scheme, and now this is something that I don't believe changed significantly between Cesare and Conte di Cavour. There was a bow extension. The lines of Cesare are different. Cesare's bow is built differently, modeled differently, certainly in game, and was in reality. But the armor scheme, the overall armor scheme, is pretty well the same. You got this 220 millimeter belt underneath 130 millimeters worth of casemate. This is nice, especially this 43 millimeters of deck armor right here, and then kind of the 30 mils through the center. Now this is not enough. These 30 mils is not enough to make her that. This will not bounce high explosive 8-inch shells. But you have to remember that at Tier 5, most of the cruisers, many of the cruisers that Conte di Cavour will run into are light cruisers, and this 30 millimeters is good enough to make 6-inch HE shells shatter unless they've started investing in IFHE, which some of those captains will, but a lot of mid to low tier cruiser players are leveling up. They don't have the captain points to spare. So this will vary by engagement and ship you're up against. She can take the HE full pins here on the bow if they drop in shells in here and everything, but, that's fine. It is what it is. You can't protect everything. So, yeah, the armor scheme of the ship is actually fairly robust if she's going to be fighting cruisers. She does have this, she's got an 85 millimeter strake here down at the waterline. It's a little thicker. You see kind of a graduated, we go from 85 to 110 to 130, and then back to this 220 millimeter belt. Even her belt has got a little bit of graduation to it, right? You see here 220 millimeters at the waterline, and then 210, or 250 right below the waterline. And then 210 is weak. So it kind of thickens up a bit here, just below the waterline, like maybe kind of right at it. It's hard to see. You can kind of barely, if I zoom in here, maybe you can kind of see the waterline kind of sits right along the bottom edge of this 220 millimeter belt. The 250 is just below the waterline, and then there's the 210 right below it. So protection-wise, not too shabby. Maybe that's one of the reasons the health pool is kind of on the low side, an acknowledgement that she's armored pretty decently for a Tier 5 battleship. Maneuverability and concealment, this is where things start to kind of fall apart a little bit. Certainly the maneuverability stage, 22 knots. Woof. Now, if you're used to playing American standards, those poor bastards of you that enjoy New York and Texas, well, you're gonna feel right at home driving Conte di Cavour. But if you're used to playing Giulio Cesare, whose speed, by the way, is 27 knots, right? Stripping this turret out, right? And all the weight, the magazine, everything that went with it was a huge boon to this ship in terms of speed. Yeah, you're going to be disappointed by this ship. Handling-wise, it's still the same hull, right? Conte di Cavour does have a slightly smaller turning circle, but it's not really noteworthy. Her rudder shift time is a little better, but again, it's not really noteworthy. If you've driven a Cesare, this ship's going to handle similarly in terms of rudder responsiveness and turning circle, but you will absolutely notice the speed difference. Absolutely, unquestionably. Stealth. This is something that we normally talk about in this line because it's kind of one of their little, I won't call it a gimmick, but let's say characteristics. 12.2 base surface detection is pretty low. Again, it's not quite best in tier. If you own a Veribus Unitas, you'll know that you can get that ship all the way down to 9.4 when full stealth rig. You see here, Conte di Cavour, she'll only get down to 10.7, but that's still better than every other battleship, right? This is the stealthiest tech tree battleship, unquestionably. Even Cesare can't get this stealthy. She caps out around 12. So, again, like we were talking about with Tier 4's Dante Alighieri yesterday, it's very easy to kind of look at this ship and think of her as a supreme cruiser hunter, right? She's got a 10.7 base surface detection, married with a 16 and change kilometer range on her main battery. We'll talk about that in a minute. And 2 different shell types that will absolutely mercilessly punish cruisers just for existing in the same space where she can shoot them. So, right? It gives her, what I like about these kind of characteristics is it really defines, it gives her a nice defined role. What I don't like about it is it's, her armor scheme, her health pool, her low speed. When this thing ends up engaged with, let's say, a Congo, she's going to get bullied. She's absolutely going to get bullied, especially once the Congo can run her down, has 15,000 more hit points, and guns that will I won't say will hit harder. That's probably not quite true. I'd want to do a little testing before I said that, but she outguns the Congo, right? Conte di Cavour has 13 barrels here to Congo's 8, but I would not feel comfortable about that engagement, let's just say. That speed advantage the Congo has in that kind of an example is very significant and will get you into trouble. So her stealth is somewhat hampered, in my opinion, by marrying it to this slow speed, because it does mean that once she is engaged, once she is spotted, she's not really able to disengage and use that stealth again. She needs to murderize whatever it is that's spotting her first, and then she can try and play games with her stealth again. Main battery. Wrong tab. Here we go. Main battery. So again, we're looking at 305mm guns, just like we saw down at Tier 4's Dante Alighieri. These are the same shells, the same shell velocities, the same shell, presumably the same shell ballistics, like this, the same everything, except for the range, but the numbers are basically all identical. So once you get used to the guns and how they perform down at Tier 4, you're dealing with the same guns up here at Tier 5. The gunnery should feel very comfortable. The turret arrangement is a little unusual. You see here, she's got three triple turrets and 2 doubles. She's got a triple and a double on the bow. She's got there's the double turrets, and then she's got a triple here on the stern. Come on. There we go. One amidships, and then one all the way up on the bow. So she has 13 barrels, which is an odd number. It does make her one of the most, if not the most, heavily armed mid-tier battleships. In fact, it does look like, yep, I'm looking over there. It looks like Viribus gets 12, Revolutia gets 12, but pretty much nobody else comes in at more than 10 barrels. So offensively, this ship can pack a lot of punch. She, again, packing the SAP and the AP, much like we talked about with Dante Alighieri down at Tier 4. The AP, good for slapping around cruisers, getting those early citadels. You need to knock them down and whittle them down to size. And then the SAP being able to come in and back things up. Now, a couple things that I want to point out here. Reload, not amazing, 33 seconds, okay? And that turret traverse time, woof, 60-second turret traverse. Again, if you're used to Cesare's turret traverse is much easier to deal with, right? 36 seconds for the same turret. Apparently, Italy invented WD-40 somewhere along the way in the late 1920s, early 1930s. So they applied that WD-40 to Cesare's turrets, but they have not yet discovered it in this era, and so it is not applied to Conte di Cavour's turrets. So, yeah, woof, okay? That's something you're going to have to learn to work around. And this is a ship that with her handling, her turning circle, even her slow speed, she will absolutely outturn these turrets all day long, like most battleships do. Like, that's not a thing. Secondary battery. Again, a lot of these little 120mm pop guns along the casemate armor, 4.5 kilometers of range. I'll say the same thing that I said talking about Dante Alighieri. If you find these things firing, you're probably already in trouble. So, yeah, good luck. Best of luck to you. If it's a destroyer, hey, load the SAP and cross your fingers. If it's a cruiser, load the SAP and cross your fingers. Most cruisers at this tier are definitely torpedo armed. There are a few minor exceptions, I think, but not many. So offensively, when you look at the maneuverability, you look at the main battery, you look at the shell types, it becomes very obvious, again, just like at Tier 4, this ship wants to seek out, hunt down, and destroy enemy cruisers. Right? She's just purpose-built for it. All the tools you could ever want to do that. Where she's going to struggle is overcoming this top speed. Right? This is going to be a problem. AA defense, we'll talk about this real briefly. Much like we saw down at Tier 4 with Dante Alighieri, Conte di Cavour here has no outer ring and no inner ring. Everything is in the middle ring on the back of these little 76mm guns she has mounted on top of her turrets, and the 37mm Berettas that she has kind of mounted along the hull in a few strategic spots. Her mid-range aura, 186 there. You see with the 75% accuracy brings it down to about 140. That's not amazing. There's other... Tier 5 is where Battleship AA starts to matter, right? It starts to become relevant. Ships start to have some. So this is not a noteworthy number, but it is... it's there. She'll kill a few planes, but she's going to be pretty vulnerable to aircraft, especially with that 22 knot speed. Especially with that 22. I'm really hung up on the speed. I really think that's going to be what cripples this ship, right? You look at all the other characteristics and you're like, man, this ship could be so good. If not for the fact that she's just so damn slow. If she had an engine upgrade, of course, she didn't have one historically, right? This would have to be a wargaming invention. But if she had an engine upgrade that maybe took her speed up to like 24.5 knots, I'd feel a little more comfortable about this ship. But right now, she doesn't have that. So yeah, does she have AA? Yes. Is it significant? No, not really. She'll kill a few planes and then get hammered by whatever the carrier wants to do. Typical low-tier battleship. I forgot to look at this on Dante Alighieri yesterday, but it'll be the same thing. Yes, as we saw, nothing's fancy in the consumable department, right? You've got a standard damage control party and a standard heal. Yeah, there's nothing exciting here, and that's really about it. So yeah, I'm not as enamored of this ship as I look at Dante Alighieri Tier 4 and I think this might be fun to derp around every now and then. I don't feel that way about Conte di Cavour, and some of that is because of in general, my general distaste towards just battleship play, certainly low to mid-tier battleship play, but that speed, that 22 knot speed just makes me cry, right? That hurts my soul. I used to love playing my Texas, right? But then eventually I got to a point where I'd played so much cruiser, I couldn't go back to Texas. I couldn't go back to playing that ship because it took forever to get anywhere, and the range was not great, and it was just like, oh my God, this is painful. I have a feeling I'm going to feel that way when I finally put this ship on the board and take her out. So anyway, guys, there's our first look at Tier 5's Conte di Cavour. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Wash your hands, be safe, and I'll catch you next time.